In today's video, seeing as it's practically Halloween, we are gonna discuss one of the most classic Halloween tales there has ever been. The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Ooh. So, alright, let's go!
Yeah! So we start off in a quaint little village in New York called Terrytown. But more specifically, in a little wooded area of the town known as Sleepy Hollow. And it's a pretty big day for Sleepy Hollow indeed. This is the day when the new schoolmaster comes to town. Ichabod Crane is his name. Being tall and lanky is his game. He is kind of an odd kind of looking fellow, and a lot of people don't quite know what to think about him. But this dude is pretty slick. He is a pretty good teacher, which is great for the school kids, and he goes completely out of his way to make sure the school kids are treated well, even if they're being quite devious. Because if the school kids are being treated good, quite a better chance of Ichabod getting a free meal from those school children's parents. So him being pretty charming with the kids and being pretty charming with their kids' parents, he suddenly is getting the reputation of being quite the ladies' man. This sly devil him, hey? Ha! Meanwhile, Ichabod meets up with the lovely and beautiful Katrina Van Tassel, where she is not only a complete knockout, but her father, Baltus Van Tassel, is the richest farmer around. And instantly, Ichabod is infatuated with Katrina. Although, if we're being honest, he's more infatuated with her father's wealth. Which isn't really uncommon, and in fact, every other man in Sleepy Hollow feels the exact same way about Katrina. It's kind of like that movie, There's Something About Mary, you know, when everybody wants to be with Mary and they're all crazy about her. Pretty much the same thing with Katrina. So with that, every man in Sleepy Hollow is trying to woo her. But realistically, there is one suitor that is heads and shoulders above the rest. Abraham Van Brunt, also known as Brom Bones. He is quite well respected, he's handsome, he's rugged, he's a burly man, you know. A man's man. So he naturally became kind of the #1 suitor. However, sometimes Katrina isn't too hip on his boisterous bravado and all that stuff. Nay! So she has taken a bit of a shining to Ichabod and his unusual charm and kindness. Or is she? Like, is this just some kind of a game that she's playing with Brom, or is it like real? Not quite sure, but either way, the battle for Katrina's heart begins. Which is a pretty dangerous game for Ichabod to play, you know? Because Brom can actually punch a literal hole through a literal tree. He can practically knock someone's head off. Which may or may not be foreshadowing. But even with that physical danger to Ichabod and his person, he still pursues Katrina. And I don't know how, but he always seems to get the upper hand on Brom. He dodges every attack and somehow parries with an accidental attack of his own. It's like no matter what Brom does, every chance for his success blows up in his face, making Ichabod look better. Later on, Baltus Van Tassel, as he does every single year, is hosting his Halloween party. And to stroke some fire between Ichabod and Brom, Katrina has invited Ichabod along to the party, seeing as Brom has already been invited by her father. So Ichabod rents a horse and takes off to this fancy soiree. And man, like this party is lit! There's this dude going ballistic on a fiddle, the dance floor is bopping, the drinks are pouring, the pipes are getting smoked, like, man, it's like the party of the year! And Ichabod, to his credit, man, he is actually a really good dancer. Like, he's spent a lot of time learning how to dance, and it totally shows. Therefore, he is cutting quite the rug with Katrina at this party. Much to the dismay of Brom Bones, who is just sitting off on the side because he don't really know how to dance that well. So yet again, Ichabod wins! Ha! And with that, Brom gets stuck dancing with this lady in the green dress, you know, who he doesn't really want to dance with. An underrated character in the story to be sure, but man, she is really happy to dance with anybody. But with all of this, man, oh my god, Brom is pissed! He's dancing with the woman he doesn't want to dance with, and the woman he does want to dance with is completely getting charmed off her feet from this pencil-necked geek. Like, how could he be losing to this guy? It makes no sense! But eventually, Brom finally finds a kink in the armor. He finds out that Ichabod is very superstitious, right? He absolutely believes in bad luck being thrust upon you from all these superstitious little kind of things. He totally believes in ghosts, ghouls, and goblins and all that kind of stuff. So now, Brom has a plan. The tradition at the end of the Van Tassel Halloween shindig is to tell scary ghost stories. So Brom really fires up the story of the local legend, the Headless Horseman, the most fearsome supernatural being in the entire area. The Headless Horseman appears every Halloween in the wooded glen, looking for a new head to replace his own. And if anyone is foolish enough to go into the glen, well, they are the next target. But this specter does have limitations. His power only reaches up to the bridge, and if you are lucky enough to pass it, well, you are lucky enough to live the rest of the day. So a lot of people are having a pretty good laugh at this story, you know, especially Katrina, and especially how much Brom has really hammed up this story. And at this point, man, like, Ichabod is freaking out. You know, like, I guess, you know, he should have been wearing brown pants to the party. But now, at this point, the party is over and everyone is going home. And Ichabod, well, the only way he can get home is through the glen where the Headless Horseman lives. Or unlives? Resides, I guess. So, you know, him being the ghost-believing type, you know, he is understandably freaking out at this point. The glen is extra spooky and creepy tonight. Every small little sound, every little weird thing in the shadows, it's all making him go insane with fear. But, you know, after a while of being completely freaked out, he eventually calms himself down, you know, realizing that he's just having all these visions in his head kind of just amplify his fear, and it's all not really real. But, wouldn't you know it, the Headless Horseman appears. And like, holy crap, this guy is real? Which is horrible enough, but this Headless Horseman wants Ichabod's head. So he is chasing him and taunting him throughout the entire glen. The end of Ichabod seems inevitable at this point. But after a bunch of fancy footwork, you know, from Ichabod and his horse, they eventually make it to and past the bridge. The horseman, not being able to cross this bridge, has no other option but to throw a fiery jack-o'-lantern at Ichabod in a last-ditch attempt of horrifying him. The next day, Ichabod is nowhere to be found. Some people say that he moved out of the village to another place that doesn't have ghosts, and that he married a rich widow. Some say that the Headless Horseman took him away to his wherever it is, but who knows? Either way, Ichabod is gone. And that left Brom Bones without any competition to marry the love of his life, Katrina. So happy endings all around, hooray! And with that, that is the end of this spooky tale.
Hey! What a great cartoon! Like, everything about it, right? The comedy was awesome, the animation was awesome, the music was freaking fantastic! Every song, man, no matter what they were singing about, like, what a catchy, boppy song! Oh! And of course it would be an awesome song because you have the legendary Bing Crosby as the narrator, as the main voice actor for, well, basically all the characters, and as the vocalist too. Oh, just frickin' fantastic! And it's also educational. This cartoon taught me the word elucidate. And man, like when they were putting this cartoon together, like they knew what they were doing. It is a pretty faithful adaptation of the original short story, so that in of itself is awesome. But man, oh man, like the whole scene of Ichabod Crane going into the spooky glen at the end of the story there, like, man, the people working on the cartoon really know how to make a scene creepy and dark and just foreboding. And like, not even when the Headless Horseman showed up, but just when Ichabod Crane was walking around the glen and like how every little sound was freaking and tripping him out. So creepy and spooky and well done. But speaking of characters, one of the things that's really interesting about this is the perception of Ichabod Crane and Brom. A lot of people do see Ichabod as a protagonist and the good guy, and they see Brom as the villain and just the, all-around jerk. But really, nay. Even as this cartoon stated, like, Brom was really well liked throughout the village. He might be a little rough around the edges and kind of boisterous, but at the end of the day, man, he has a heart of gold. Ichabod, he comes off as a really nice guy, he's all well-read and that kind of stuff, but he really is kind of more a self-centered opportunist, tricking people with their emotions so he can get free meals all the time. And even when he was courting Katrina, sure, some of it was like, yeah, Katrina's totally awesome, I really want to be with her. But mostly he wanted to be with her so he could inherit her father's wealth. Not so much about lovey-dovey, it's all about the money. And what did so many women see in Ichabod Crane anyway? Is it his different looks that kind of make him stand out and make him look interesting? Is it his unique brand of charm that he keeps pouring on? Or is it the fact that he has abnormally large hands and feet, hey? I think we found the answer there, hey? Ding, ding, ding. But still, like I say, a freaking fantastic cartoon, a pretty awesome adaptation from the original story, and just like awesome all around. And one of the more popular Halloween stories out there. It's pretty much to Halloween what A Christmas Carol is to Christmas. So if you haven't seen it, I suggest you do. But with that, we do have a whole lot more things behind the scenes, with Ichabod Crane and Sleepy Hollow and the Headless Horseman and some other kind of random stuff like that going on over here.
So yes indeed, hey, Sleepy Hollow and its legends. So let us take a little deeper dive into this classic, popular, and influential tale. So to start off, we have American writer Washington Irving, who was born in 1783, and if you were wondering, yes, he was indeed named after George Washington. So while Washington Irving was living in Manhattan during 1978, the yellow fever hit, which is not good. So his family, being concerned about his health, shipped him a little bit up north the island to some friends in a village called Terrytown. And he instantly fell in love with Terrytown, right? The natural beauty of the place. He learned all about the different ghost stories and folklores and all that kind of stuff, surrounding the area, which would be influential on him, seeing as Terrytown was the setting for Sleepy Hollow. So speaking of him writing stuff, he put together a collection of a bunch of his essays and short stories into a book, or I guess an anthology, which was called The Sketchbook of Geoffrey Crayon, Gent, where Geoffrey Crayon is a pseudonym for Washington Irving. The first such installment of this sketchbook was published in June 23rd of 1819, and it featured a classic story, Rip Van Winkle. He did write a bunch more stories and essays for all these sketchbook installments, and for the 6th installment of his sketchbook, we did see the story of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which was published in March 15th in 1820. And man, oh man, hey, what a story! So let's get into some of the nitty-gritty bits of the story itself, starting with the village of Sleepy Hollow, New York. So, right off the bat, there was no place called Sleepy Hollow in the time that Washington Irving was alive. As we say, he lived in a place called Terrytown, which was the setting for Legend of Sleepy Hollow. And as we see in the book, Sleepy Hollow refers to the spooky wooded glen that Ichabod Crane strode through at the end of the story. Although, technically, there was a Sleepy Hollow. So the place was called Terrytown, right? Officially and all that kind of stuff. But it did have a lot of Dutch settlers in there, and those Dutch settlers referred to the place as Die Slappering Haven, or something like that. I'm sorry, I don't speak that language. But translated into English, it means kind of like Sleeper's Haven or Sleepy Harbor. You could say it means Sleepy Hollow, like, it's not far off the mark, but, not the official name of the place. Not for a while, anyway. So in around the year of 1874, the area where Sleepy Hollow kind of was became incorporated into its own village, where it was christened with the name North Terrytown. But in 1996, North Terrytown had a name change, where it was finally changed to Sleepy Hollow. And also, the official seal of the town does feature the Headless Horseman, because, why not, right? You're in for a penny, man, you're in for a pound. So that piece of information is awesome, but what of the main character, Ichabod Crane? So Washington Irving has stated that the character Ichabod Crane was based upon one of his old friends, Jesse Merwin, a claim that even former US President Martin Van Buren stated as truth. So Jesse Merwin was a schoolmaster in Kinderhook, New York, where he eventually became an attorney, similar to Ichabod Crane. And also Ichabod and Merwin both were born in Connecticut. Also, fun fact, so popular is the Sleepy Hollow book that the Kinderhook Central School District changed its name to the Ichabod Crane Central School District, of Kinderhook or something like that. Kind of shows you how popular this story is. Although, some people in Terrytown believe that Ichabod Crane was based upon a local schoolmaster there, Samuel Youngs, who was also a friend of Irving's. So, he said, she said, but, Van Buren said, so case closed. The name Ichabod Crane allegedly was inspired by a real-life person, and that would be Ichabod Crane. Ichabod Bennett Crane was a colonel with the U.S. Army and quite well decorated. So apparently Irving and Crane did meet in 1814, and you would think for a creative person like Washington Irving, a name like Ichabod Crane would absolutely stand out in your memory. So that's the long and skinny on this, long and skinny guy. So now we get to the main villain, the Headless Horseman. So as we see in the story, the tale that Brom Bones was mentioning has stated that the Headless Horseman was a German Hessian trooper who was fighting alongside the British Army during the Revolutionary War. And this trooper was actually decapitated by a cannonball, where some say he was quickly buried by the Van Tassel family, like the Van Tassels in the story. So from a historic point of view, that actually kind of did happen. There was Hessian soldiers there, and one of them was decapitated. So this was said to have happened during the Battle of the White Plains in 1776, which, oddly enough, took place around Halloween time. But for Headless Horseman characters, there have been countless legends and folklores and stories about a Headless Horseman of some sort from all around the world since, at least, the Middle Ages. Many Dutch legends, which Irving himself would have learned about while living in Terrytown. He also read a great many German stories which did feature Headless Horsemen as well. You also have a lot of other legends from Scotland, Ireland, India, Wales, and I'm sure basically every country on the planet. Except I don't think we have any in Canada. The Headless Zamboni driver? I don't know. You know what? Actually, maybe. Also, the story with the Headless Horseman chasing around Ichabod Crane is, as they say, somewhat based upon a story by one of Irving's friends, Sir Walter Scott, and his story called The Chase. In it, it did not exactly feature a Headless Horseman, but it did feature a hunter who was being chased by demons on horseback through the forest, so that's kind of what you kind of have with the Headless Horseman in a way, right? So there you go, another story to read. And speaking of this story, not only was it a fantastic cartoon that was shown in this featured episode, but it was also a fantastic short story that you could read as a book. So what are the differences between the cartoon and the short story? Well, for the most part, it was actually pretty bang on, you know? Well, except for all the singing and dancing. It was pretty awesome to see. Even through the singing and dancing, they did get the points across of, what the story was saying at that particular junction. So it was pretty good. But there was some other things that were changed or just ignored. For example, at the end of the Halloween party, Ichabod Crane was trying to further woo Katrina, either by professing his love to her or even possibly proposing to her. Even Washington Irving says within the story that he doesn't know what happened between them. But the end result of it was Katrina basically told him to take a hike. She never actually had any interest in him, and he was totally pissed off because he realized he was being played a fool the entire time. As he was all hopping mad, that's when he left home, and that's when he went through the Glen of Sleepy Hollow. And while he was being chased in the Glen by the Headless Horseman, the cartoon basically kind of states that the Headless Horseman is a real thing. Not just some tall tale, not some fantastic story, but there really is a Headless Horseman apparition trying to get someone's head. Heck, Ichabod Crane even looked down the Headless Horseman's empty neck, to see if there was anything there. Which of course there wasn't. But in the original story, it is heavily implied that the horseman was actually Brom dressed as the Headless Horseman, trying to scare Ichabod out of town. And with him being scared out of town, in the cartoon it basically stated that Ichabod was so terrified of the Headless Horseman and his encounter with him that he left Sleepy Hollow for good there and then. But in the original story, he didn't leave because he was scared. He left because, he was kind of worried for his safety, I guess, a little bit, but mostly because he was still pissed off at Katrina and all the other women in Sleepy Hollow who treated him like a kind of a joke, I guess. So scorned was he that he left for good. Pshaw! Of course, all the people in Sleepy Hollow who, believe in the Headless Horseman story, believe that Ichabod was actually taken away by the Headless Horseman. But in the story, there was a farmer who did travel around New York and did wind up in New York City, where he stated he did see Ichabod Crane in New York City, and he is now a judge. But, yes, hey, so those are some of the basic things about Sleepy Hollow and some of its characters. I guess the bigger things, Of course, if you're gonna talk about Sleepy Hollow and everything about the story, man, we could be talking for hours. I'm not sure that I have all that time, so we'll kind of leave it here with that. But yeah, man, with this, that, those, and the other things, I guess, that's that. Also, if you're interested, I created my own comic book channel, 215 Comics. And currently, I have created my own cartoon series, The Adventures of the Density. And recently started a radio series featuring my newest character, Elastoma, with more titles to come. So if you want to check it out, I'll leave a link up top here to that channel and some links at the end of the video. Yeah! Right on, and there you go. So thanks for watching the video. I hope you liked it as much as I did making it. Also, feel free to check out the source material that I featured in this video. And if you want to leave a comment on anything you may have liked or things I might have missed in this, feel free to do so. Or anything else, just to say hi. That's cool too. And other than that, have a great day. Thanks.